Good evening and welcome again to all of you, especially to all of my brothers and sisters who are here with us from the various faith communities as we come together on this commemoration day. We will sing at the offering Ecce Quam Bonum, words that mean how good and pleasant it is when brothers and sisters come together. And in our Christian tradition, we believe that the words of the psalmist are Christ's very words. And so it is Christ himself who is pleased by our coming together this night. You notice that we began our service this evening with a formal presentation of the covenant between our churches, for which we thank Sister Joan McGuire and Bishop Sherman Hicks. The signing of the original covenant coincided with the founding of the ELCA as a church in 1988, making it the new church's first major ecumenical act. That event also signaled the level of trust and friendship that has been established between the two churches in Chicago, as well as a commitment to continue to work and pray together for unity in the coming years. This evening, we are here to reaffirm our past, both the trust and friendship, as well as a commitment to work and pray for unity as we walk together into the future. We are so encouraged by what happened 1 year ago this month at a joint Catholic-Lutheran commemoration of the Reformation in Lund, Sweden. On that occasion, Pope Francis zeroed in on a key aspect of the rancor that once characterized Catholic-Protestant relations. There was a sincere will on the part of both sides to profess and uphold the true faith, he explained. But at the same time, we realized that we closed in on ourselves out of fear or bias with regard to the faith which others profess with a different accent and language. The challenge implied in the Pope's message is to live an authentic Christianity that never closes in on itself, one that calls us to leave our comfort zones, to listen to others. This holds meaning, not only for ecumenism, but for the way we view ourselves as church and value our common witness to the gospel and the apostolic tradition that binds us together. Jesus and his disciples were people always on the move. They preached the good news, when necessary, using words. They accompanied the excluded. They healed the sick. The gospel of Jesus is a gospel of action. It is alive, like a vine that ever sprouts new branches. It is unafraid of the pruning that comes with reform, pruning that brings new growth. The gospel of Jesus holds that God is doing something ever new with the people in whose hearts he plants the seeds of justice. In saying all of this, Pope Francis was echoing the sentiments of the Lund Principle and building on it, with its roots in the Faith and Order Commission of the World Council of Churches meeting in Lund, Sweden in 1952. This principle, so important to ecumenical relations between Christian churches, affirms that churches should act together in all matters except those in which deep differences of conviction compel them to act separately. Our common witness to the gospel in reaching out to the poor has so much to offer us as we move forward, even if differing on significant matters. Most assuredly, this principle informed and guided the early Catholic ELCA dialogue of the late 1980s in Chicago under the direction of Cardinal Bernardine and Bishop Sherman Hicks. Tonight we affirm the Lund Principle and pledge to act together in all the ways that we can, given our unity in Christ through baptism. Tonight, I want to reflect on how our common witness is so critical for our own identity as disciples of Christ today. And I'm prompted to do so by the observation of ELCA presiding Bishop Elizabeth Eaton at the most recent National Workshop on Christian Unity. These commemorative gatherings are great and important, she noted, but I want to consider, what are we going to do together on October the 32nd? Oh, I don't want another day in October. But she asked a great question. My simple suggestion this night is that we take up the reform of our churches together by reflecting on what it means to be the Church of Jesus Christ, what it means to be authentic disciples, and that we find unity in working together to put the gospel into action. Even before his papacy began, Pope Francis called the Catholic Church to rethink its mission. In remarks he delivered just before the 2013 conclave intervention, the soon-to-be Pope explained. In Revelation, Jesus says that he is at the door and knocks. The idea, he continued, is that Jesus is knocking from the outside the door. But then Cardinal Bergoglio inverted the image, asking his brother cardinals, and indeed the entire Christian church, to consider the times in which Jesus knocks from within, so that we will let him come out. When the church keeps Christ to herself and doesn't let him out, he continued, it becomes self-referential. And then, as self-referential, it gets sick. To avoid this, the church must go out of itself to the peripheries to minister to the needy. This is the gospel in action. This is authentic evangelization. This is a mission entrusted to the churches by Jesus Christ. Francis would later deepen his point when he called on churches to be field hospitals for the wounded, a profound image that has captured the imagination of the world. Thinking of the church in this way requires us to radically rethink ecclesial life. Our challenge is to give priority to the wounded. That means placing the needs of others before our own. The field hospital church is the antithesis of the self-referential church. It is a term that triggers the imagination, forcing us to rethink our identity, mission, and yes, our life together as disciples of Jesus. Of course, there is a risk in all of this, radically rethinking how we are church. There is a risk in going out into the field of battle, of moving out of one's comfort zone and the security of one's experiences and the past. There is risk in working together, in getting our shoes muddy, and in making mistakes. But bringing the medicine of mercy to the world is the most effective way for the disciples of Jesus to recapture the joy of the gospel. It is this joy that ignited the hearts of dispirited disciples on the road to Emmaus, uniting them in a way that allowed them to do even greater things as Jesus promised. The field hospital heals the healers as well. Something transformative happens to them as they work together to serve the needy. They gain a fresh sense of purpose, hope, and joy as they discover new ways of healing. They draw others to Christ in the desire to share that joy the world cannot give nor take away. Can this healing of the healer that comes in the joy of the gospel also include the wounds of the past? The wounds of our division? Can this joy once again leave the hearts of others burning with the desire to follow Christ because they see us filled with that joy? When the church becomes a field hospital, it can radically change the way we view our community life and our relationship with one another. We need not be defined solely as a group that lives in the same neighborhood, shares a common history, ethnic heritage, social status, that comes together weekly for worship. Rather, each of our communities can understand ourselves as people who take up the work of healing together by sharing in the sufferings of others. This means being united as disciples who tap into and share our talents to find creative ways to help those most in need. This is Christ's challenge for the church today, to be a field hospital for the needy, to bring those glad tidings, not to sit back and wait for those who need them to ask. Is it not in recapturing the joy of the gospel as missionary disciples who reach out to the margins, to the poor, the defenseless, to those who suffer racism, want, illness, neglect, where reformation of the churches must begin and continue? Here in Chicagoland, we know these needs all too well. We witness the daily impact of violence in the streets, of hopelessness in the hearts of those living in segregated neighborhoods and locked in generational poverty, and a political environment that traps the powerless. This cycle persists, Pope Francis explained this week, when dialogue is replaced either by a futile antagonism that can even threaten civil coexistence, or by the domination of a single political power that constrains and obstructs a true experience of democracy. In the one, the Pope continued, bridges are burned. In the other, walls are erected. We must bring the joy of the gospel to all these areas. We must be missionaries of Christ's mercy to a world in need. When we join together as brothers and sisters to serve the common good, united by our faith in Christ, we become the bridge that can span divisions, even those that are 500 years old. Animated by the joy of the gospel, trusting that we are doing not our own work but Christ, we heed his abiding teaching that whoever remains in me and I in him will bear much fruit, because without me you can do nothing.